"You're in the wrong seat," Ethan Brooks said, standing in the aisle, blocking the path like a wall. "First class isn't for staff. Economy's in the back." The cabin went still. Not quiet. Still. The kind of stillness that feels like a held breath. Like something fragile, just cracked, and everyone knows it. Danielle Carter didn't move. She stayed seated in 1A, hands resting loosely in her lap, spine straight, eyes lifted slowly to meet his. Her face didn't harden. It didn't flinch. That, more than anything, unsettled him. Ethan was used to resistance breaking fast. People usually folded when he spoke like that. Years in boardrooms had trained his voice to carry authority without effort. Mid-40s, tall, broad-shouldered, navy suit cut sharp at the waist. Italian leather shoes polished to a mirror shine. He looked like money. He knew it. He relied on it. Behind him, the soft hum of the aircraft ventilation whispered through the cabin. Somewhere up front, a glass clinked. Champagne. Someone laughed too loudly, and then stopped. Danielle glanced down at the boarding pass in her hand, just to be certain. 1A. Window. First class. She'd memorized it when she booked months ago. She looked back up. "This is my seat," she said. Her voice was calm, not defensive, not apologetic, calm in a way that didn't ask permission. Ethan exhaled through his nose and smiled, a thin curl of impatience. He leaned closer, lowering his voice now, but not enough. "Listen," he said, slow, deliberate. "I fly this route all the time. I always sit it here. There's been a mistake. You don't want to make this harder than it has to be." Harder. The word hung there, a warning disguised as advice. Danielle noticed the details the camera would catch if this were a film. The faint smell of cologne, cedar, and something sharp. The gold cufflinks engraved with his initials, the way his hand tightened around the back of the seat as if it already belonged to him. She noticed the woman across the aisle pretending to scroll through her phone while watching every second from the corner of her eye. The man 2 rows back who shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat like he wanted to disappear. "I booked this seat," Danielle said. "I paid for it. You're sitting in it." Ethan laughed. Loud, just enough to signal disbelief. He straightened, glanced around, making sure people were watching. "Okay," he said, "let's do this properly." He snapped his fingers once. "Miss," he called out. A young flight attendant hurried over. Emily Rogers, mid-20s, hair pulled back tight, eyes already tired. She had the look of someone 3 hours into a shift that was already going wrong. "Yes, sir," she said, breath quick, smile practiced. Ethan gestured toward Danielle without looking at her. "This woman is confused. She's in my seat." Emily blinked. She glanced down at Danielle, then at Ethan, then at the seat number above their heads. 1A. Her fingers tightened around the tablet she held. "Ma'am," Emily said gently, "may I see your boarding pass?" Danielle handed it over. No rush, no drama. Emily scanned it. Her brow creased. She scanned it again. Her lips parted slightly. This pass is for Seat 1A, Emily said. Her voice dropped a notch. This is her seat. The words landed heavier than she intended. A ripple moved through the cabin. Ethan waved a dismissive hand. The system's wrong. It happens. I'm already settled. He glanced pointedly at his jacket draped over the armrest, his shoes tucked under the ottoman. Just move her to another first-class seat. Or economy. I don't care. I have a meeting in London. I need the window. Emily hesitated. Danielle could see it in her eyes. The calculation. The fear. She was new. That kind of passenger complaint could end a career before it started. Sir, Emily said, softer now. I can check availability. There might be another seat. No, Danielle said. Not loud, not sharp, just firm. Emily turned to her. Danielle met her gaze, steady and kind. I booked this seat because I need privacy. I'm not moving. Ethan's smile vanished. His jaw tightened. You're holding up boarding, he said. You're causing a scene. Danielle looked past him, down the narrow aisle filling with passengers. Roller bags bumped into seats. A man in a grey blazer paused, watching openly now. A woman behind him whispered something into her husband's ear. The air felt charged, metallic. I didn't start this, Danielle said. Ethan leaned in close again, his voice low, sharp. People like you always say that. The words were quiet, but they cut. Emily inhaled sharply. She glanced toward the galley, toward the cockpit, anywhere but at Danielle. Ma'am, she whispered, I can offer you a voucher, or another flight. Please. Danielle's chest tightened, not with anger, but with something older, familiar. The exhaustion of being measured before being heard. She looked at Ethan again, at the confidence that came from never being questioned, at the certainty that the world would bend. Last time, Ethan said, straightening. Get up. The cabin waited. Danielle didn't. She stood instead. Slowly. The motion drew every eye. She stepped into the aisle, close enough now that Ethan could see his reflection in her eyes. He expected heat, defiance. He found neither. He found control. Okay, she said. Ethan's shoulders relaxed. A smug breath escaped him. Good, he muttered. Finally. Danielle turned away. She didn't head toward economy. She walked forward, past the first row, into the galley. The curtain brushed her shoulder as she slipped through. Emily watched her go, confused, uneasy. Ethan dropped back into the seat with a satisfied sigh, already reaching for his tablet. In the galley, the smell of coffee hung thick. Metal carts rattled softly. Danielle reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. Her thumb hovered for a second before she dialed. The line rang once, twice. Danielle, a man's voice answered. Older, calm, alert. Yes, she said. It's me. A pause. Aren't you boarding? I am, Danielle said, eyes fixed on the thin curtain separating her from the cabin. She could hear Ethan laughing now, telling someone about an incompetent airline. But we have a problem. What kind of problem? Danielle breathed in slowly. A passenger is refusing to vacate my seat. Another pause. Heavier this time. What's his name? She glanced back through the gap in the curtain. At the back of Ethan's head. At the confident slouch of a man who thought he had already won. Ethan Brooks, she said. And he thinks this plane belongs to him. The voice on the other end sharpened. I'll take care of it. Danielle closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them, the calm returned, colder now, more focused. Behind her, the engines began to spool down instead of up. The pitch dropped. A chime sounded overhead. In first class, Ethan frowned. The captain's voice crackled through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been instructed to hold at the gate. Please remain seated. The cabin erupted in groans. Ethan leaned back, irritation flashing across his face. He looked toward the galley, expecting to see the woman shrinking away. Instead, he saw Danielle standing perfectly still, phone in hand, watching him with an expression he couldn't place yet. It wasn't fear, it was assessment. Ethan Brooks hated delays. They were an insult to momentum, a disruption to the natural order where things moved when he said they moved. He checked his watch, the weight of it familiar, grounding. The second hand crept forward with deliberate disrespect. Around him, first class shifted and murmured. The man across the aisle sighed loudly. A woman 2 rows back muttered something about connections. Someone laughed, brittle and annoyed. Ethan rolled his neck once and looked toward the galley again. Danielle Carter hadn't moved. She stood there, half framed by the curtain, phone lowered now. Her posture relaxed in a way that irritated him more than shouting ever could. She wasn't pacing. She wasn't pleading with the crew. She was waiting. What is this now? He said, not to anyone in particular. Emily Rogers reappeared at his side, her expression tight. Sir, she said, choosing her words carefully, operations has asked us to pause boarding. For what reason? Ethan snapped. I don't have that information yet. Ethan scoffed. Unbelievable. He raised his voice just enough to carry. I have a meeting that moves 7 figures before lunch. This delay is costing me money. The word money did its job. Heads turned. The older gentleman in seat 2. C glanced at Ethan, then away, as if distancing himself from a contagion. Emily swallowed. I understand, sir, she said. We're doing everything we can. Ethan leaned back, spreading his arms, occupying space. Then get her out of here. Emily followed his gaze to Danielle. The line of sight felt like a trap. Sir, Emily said quietly, please lower your voice. Ethan laughed again, sharper now. Or what? Emily didn't answer. She stepped away, heart pounding, toward the cockpit. Her shoes made soft, hurried sounds against the carpet. Danielle watched her go, reading the fear in her shoulders. She knew that walk. She'd seen it before in other forms, other rooms. People trying to solve a problem without power, hoping politeness would be enough. In the cockpit, the captain had gone quiet. The intercom crackled once, then fell silent. Outside the windows, rain streaked the glass in thin diagonal lines, turning the tarmac into a smear of reflected lights. The engines remained still. Ethan leaned toward the man beside him, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "This airline's gone downhill," he said. "Letting anyone wander into first class these days." The man gave a non-committal grunt, eyes forward. Ethan felt the faint itch of irritation at not being agreed with. He straightened again and glanced back toward the galley. Danielle shifted her weight slightly. That was all. But the movement caught his eye like a flare. She turned her head, not fully, just enough to look past him, toward the cockpit door. Her expression was unreadable, focused, almost clinical. A new sound cut through the cabin. Footsteps. Heavier. Purposeful. Not the soft glide of a flight attendant. The curtain pulled back. Two figures stepped into first class. A man in a dark blazer with an airline badge clipped at his waist, and a woman beside him in a structured navy jacket, hair pulled into a tight bun. The terminal manager. Ethan recognized the type instantly. Middle-aged, efficient, used to solving problems without apology. They didn't look at him. They walked past row 1 and stopped directly in front of Danielle. "Miss Carter," the woman said, extending her hand. "I'm Linda Morales. I'm very sorry for the inconvenience." The cabin froze again. Not still this time. Shocked, Ethan's breath caught, shallow and sharp. "Miss Carter." He turned fully in his seat now, heart beginning to thud against his ribs. Danielle took Linda's hand, her grip firm but brief. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I appreciate the urgency." "Of course," Linda replied. "We've been briefed." Ethan stood up abruptly, the movement scraping his knees against the seat. "Excuse me," he said loudly. "I'm the one being inconvenienced here." Linda turned slowly. Her eyes met his, steady and assessing. "Mr. Brooks," she said. The fact that she knew his name sent a thin thread of unease through him. "Yes," he said. "Finally. I assume you're here to resolve this." "We are," Linda said. "Immediately." Ethan gestured to the seat. "Then have her moved so we can depart." Linda didn't glance at the seat. She didn't glance at the boarding pass. She looked only at Ethan. "Sir," she said, voice level, "you are currently occupying a seat that does not belong to you." A murmur rippled through the cabin, low and electric. Ethan laughed, but it came out wrong. Too quick, too loud. "That's absurd." "Your ticket assigns you to seat 2D, Linda said. "You moved without authorization." "I always sit here," Ethan snapped. "Check the records." "We did," Linda replied. "Extensively." Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. He felt heat creep up his neck. "I'm a priority customer," he said. "I have status." "Not in this moment," Linda said. "Right now, you're a passenger refusing crew instructions." Danielle watched him closely. She saw the micro cracks forming, the tightening jaw, the flicker of calculation behind his eyes as he weighed charm versus force. "This is a mistake," Ethan said, lowering his voice, trying a different angle. "I'll be happy to discuss this privately." There's nothing to discuss, Linda said. You need to collect your belongings. Ethan stared at her. Around them, phones were out now. Not openly. Discreetly. Reflections in dark screens. Lenses angled just enough. You can't be serious, Ethan said. Do you know who I am? Linda didn't blink. Yes. The word landed heavier than anything else. Ethan's gaze snapped to Danielle. She met it calmly, without triumph. That was what unnerved him. She wasn't enjoying this. She wasn't angry. She was resolved. You did this, he said, pointing at her. Danielle stepped forward, closing the distance. Her voice dropped, carried only to him. She said, You did. His nostrils flared. I'll sue, he said. I'll make sure every outlet hears about this. Linda raised a hand. Sir. Lower your voice. Ethan ignored her. The cabin felt too small now, the walls too close. He could hear his own pulse in his ears. I'm not moving, he said. Call the police. Linda nodded once. We already have. The words hit like cold water. As if on cue, the sound of boots echoed from the jet bridge. Heavy. Measured. The curtain behind Linda shifted again. 2 Port Authority officers stepped into the cabin, rain darkening the shoulders of their uniforms. The taller one scanned the rows with practiced calm. Which passenger? He asked. Linda pointed. Mr. Ethan Brooks, seat 1A. Ethan's face drained of color. He straightened instinctively, smoothing his jacket, pulling his shoulders back like posture could save him. This is ridiculous, he said. I haven't done anything. Sir, the officer said, we need you to step into the aisle. Danielle moved back, giving space. Her eyes never left Ethan's face. She watched the denial fracture, watched fear begin to surface beneath entitlement. You're making a mistake, Ethan said, voice cracking just slightly. The officer repeated himself. Calm, unmoved. Ethan hesitated. Then his phone vibrated in his hand. He looked down. The screen lit his face an ugly pale. The name at the top froze him in place. He swallowed. Around them, the cabin held its breath again. Danielle saw it then. The moment the story changed, the moment he realized he was no longer in control. Sir, the officer said. Now. Ethan lifted his eyes to Danielle one last time. There was no apology there. Only a dawning understanding, too late to matter. As he stepped into the aisle, the captain's voice came over the intercom, steady and unmistakably final. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We are resolving a security matter. Danielle exhaled slowly, the tension still coiled in her chest. This wasn't over. She knew that. This was only the first door closing. But the plane was no longer his, and everyone in that cabin could feel it. The first sound Ethan Brooks heard as they pulled him forward wasn't the click of cuffs. It was laughter. Not loud, not cruel. A short, involuntary exhale from somewhere behind him, the kind that slips out when tension breaks and people don't even realize they've made a sound. His spine stiffened. He hated that more than shouting. "Unhand me," he said, trying to keep his voice even. It wobbled anyway. The taller officer didn't tighten his grip. He didn't need to. "Sir," he said, calm and flat, "walk." Ethan took a step. The aisle felt narrower now, the seats closer, eyes everywhere. He was suddenly aware of the scuff on his right shoe, the crease in his jacket where he'd sat too long, the faint smell of spilled whiskey drifting from somewhere behind him. His phone buzzed again in his hand. He ignored it. He couldn't afford to look weak. "This is harassment," he said, louder now, turning his head just enough to address the cabin. "I paid good money for this seat." A man in row 2 spoke without raising his voice. "You paid for a different one." A ripple moved through first class. A woman near the window shook her head slowly. Someone else muttered, "About time." Ethan's jaw clenched. He tried to pull his arm free. The shorter officer stepped in, blocking his path. "Sir," she said, "don't make this worse." Danielle Carter watched from just behind the curtain. She didn't step forward. She didn't need to. The scene was no longer about her presence. It was about his behavior, about what people had seen with their own eyes. Ethan was marched forward, past the bulkhead, past the galley. The smell of coffee was sharper here, mixed with metal and damp fabric from the rain outside. He stumbled slightly as the floor angled toward the door. "You don't know what you're doing," he snapped. "I'll have your badges." Neither officer replied. Behind them, Linda Morales spoke quietly into her radio. "Yes, off the aircraft. Hold departure." The jet bridge door was open. Rain pattered against the metal floor, a steady, impatient rhythm. As they stepped out, a gust of cold air hit Ethan's face. He shivered, more from shock than temperature. That was when his phone rang again. Loud, insistent. The sound echoed in the narrow space. The officer paused. "Answer it," she said, "then keep walking." Ethan's fingers trembled as he brought the phone to his ear. "What?" he barked. The voice on the other end didn't waste time. "What the hell is happening?" It was Arthur Hale, managing partner, mentor. The man who'd pulled Ethan out of obscurity 15 years ago and handed him a corner office with a view of the river. "Arthur," Ethan said, trying to steady himself. "There's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Arthur repeated, dangerously calm. "David Reynolds just called me. He says one of my senior people grounded a transatlantic flight." Ethan's mouth went dry. "David Reynolds doesn't." "He does," Arthur cut in. "Because the woman you decided to bully on that plane is Danielle Carter." Ethan stopped walking. The officers turned back. "Sir," one said sharply, "move." Arthur's voice dropped. "You're standing still." "Why?" Ethan's breath came shallow now. "She's nobody," he said, the words tumbling out too fast. "She's pretending. She tricked the crew." There was silence on the line. Not the kind that waits, the kind that judges. "Are you drunk?" Arthur asked quietly. "No," Ethan said. She started it. She wouldn't move. From her seat, Arthur said, "That she paid for." Ethan swallowed hard. Rain seeped into the leather of his shoes. He hadn't noticed until now. "You embarrassed our firm," Arthur said. "You embarrassed me." "I was defending our image," Ethan said, desperate now. "People like her try this all the time." The words hung between them. Heavy, irreversible. Arthur exhaled slowly. "Give the phone to whoever is with you." Ethan hesitated. Then he did. Arthur repeated everything to the officer in clipped, precise language. Apologies, acknowledgements, a request that landed like a formality, already too late. When the call ended, the officer handed the phone back. Her expression had changed. Not angry, disappointed. "Sir," she said, "you're being detained for interference with a flight crew and disorderly conduct." Inside the cabin, Danielle felt the shift before she heard it. The kind of silence that falls when something decisive has happened. Emily Rogers stood near the galley, hands clasped tight, eyes glassy. "It's over," Emily whispered. Danielle nodded once. She felt no rush of triumph, only a strange heaviness in her chest. Relief tangled with sadness. This wasn't a victory. It was a correction. The captain's voice came back over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. The situation has been resolved. We will resume boarding shortly." A scattered clap broke out. It spread hesitantly, then stopped. People settled back into their seats, shaking heads, whispering. Phones buzzed with messages already being typed, stories already being framed. Danielle returned to row 1. The seat was empty now. A faint, wet mark darkened the carpet where Ethan's glass had tipped earlier. She paused, looking at it, then turned away. "Miss Carter," Linda said softly, approaching. "We can have the seat cleaned, or we can rebook you." Danielle shook her head. "I'll stay on this flight." Emily stepped forward. Her voice was barely audible. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have handled it differently." Danielle met her eyes. "You did what you could," she said. "Just remember this next time." Emily nodded, swallowing hard. Danielle walked down the aisle toward economy. Heads turned as she passed. Some people smiled. Some looked away, embarrassed. A man with silver hair in row 14 stood instinctively, giving her space. "Please," he said, gesturing. "Take the aisle." "Thank you," Danielle replied, sitting by the window instead. She buckled in, the click sharp and final. The seat wasn't as wide. The fabric wasn't as soft. But the air felt lighter here. Her phone buzzed. An email notification slid across the screen. Arthur Hale. Subject line, immediate. She didn't open it. Not yet. Outside, the rain eased. The engines began to hum, deeper now, alive. The plane rolled forward slowly, then faster, pulling away from the gate. Danielle closed her eyes as the cabin tilted upward. For a moment, just a moment, she allowed herself to feel it. The weight lifting, the truth rising. Behind them, somewhere on the tarmac, Ethan Brooks stood soaked and shaking, watching the aircraft disappear into grey sky. He had thought the seat was the story. He had been wrong. The wheels lifted from the runway with a low, resonant groan, and for a moment, the cabin seemed to lean into the sky, as if unsure it wanted to leave the ground. Danielle Carter felt the pressure settle into her chest, familiar and steady, a reminder that motion had begun, and consequences traveled faster once airborne. The city fell away beneath the clouds, lights dissolving into a grey blur, and the plane leveled out, humming with restrained power. Around her, economy breathed again. Seatbelts clicked open. A child laughed 2 rows back. Someone coughed, then apologized. The older man across the aisle folded his newspaper with a soft, precise snap and glanced at Danielle, curiosity tempered by respect. He nodded once, the smallest acknowledgement, and returned to the print. Danielle exhaled slowly. Her hands rested on her thighs, fingers relaxed but alert. She could feel the adrenaline ebbing, leaving clarity behind. Not relief. Clarity. She reached into her bag and pulled out a slim folder, the corners worn from travel. Contracts, notes, timelines that did not forgive delay. She opened it, scanning lines she knew by heart, and felt the faint tremor of satisfaction when the words aligned exactly as she remembered. A flight attendant paused at her row. Not Emily. Another one. Older. Calm eyes. "Can I get you anything?" she asked. "Water, please," Danielle said. As the attendant moved on, Danielle's phone vibrated against her palm. She glanced down. Arthur Hale again. Missed call. Then another vibration. David Reynolds. Then Michael from legal. Then a message from her chief of staff that arrived with a quiet urgency that tightened her jaw. She read it once, then again. Stock chatter already starting. Someone had posted a grainy clip. First class, raised voices, a man being escorted. The caption sloppy, speculative. It would spread, she knew the rhythm. Confusion first, then outrage, then spin. Danielle locked the phone and slid it face down onto the tray table. Not yet. There was time for reaction later. Right now, there was altitude to gain. In first class, the mood had shifted from irritation to reflection. Linda Morales stood near the bulkhead, arms folded, eyes distant. She replayed the moment Ethan's confidence had fractured, the way his posture had collapsed inward when the name landed. She had seen entitlement many times. Rarely had she seen it stripped so clean. Emily Rogers sat on a jump seat near the galley, hands clasped, staring at nothing. Her heart still raced. She had done everything by the book, and nearly lost herself in the process. She remembered Danielle's voice, even, unyielding. Remembered the way power could look like patience if you didn't know how to read it. She swallowed and made herself a promise she didn't yet know how to keep. 3 hours into the flight, the cabin lights dimmed. The plane settled into a steady rhythm, the kind that lulled and coaxed. Danielle rested her head against the window, watching the night press close. The darkness outside felt infinite. Inside, the glow of screens dotted the cabin like small private fires. Her phone vibrated again. This time she answered. "Yes?" she said quietly. "Danielle," Arthur Hale said. His voice was controlled, but she could hear the edge. We need to talk. We will, she replied. I'm in the air. I know, Arthur said. That's the problem. She waited. Silence had always been her ally. Ethan was terminated, Arthur continued, effective immediately. Danielle closed her eyes, not in surprise, in confirmation. He's blaming you, Arthur said. Says you set him up. I didn't, Danielle said. He chose. Arthur sighed. There's chatter. Reporters are calling. He's already reached out to a few of them. Danielle opened her eyes, gaze steady on the reflection of her own face in the window. Then he's making it worse. Are you prepared for that? Arthur asked. She thought of the seat, the aisle, the eyes. I've been prepared my entire career. Arthur was quiet. The board wants reassurance. They'll get facts, Danielle said. And video. You're confident there's video. I saw phones, she said. People record injustice faster than they forget it. Arthur exhaled, a sound like reluctant admiration. We'll speak when you land. The call ended. Danielle remained still for a moment, then unlocked her phone. Notifications stacked like falling tiles, headlines half-formed, a whisper of a rumor dressed as truth. She scrolled once, then stopped. The water the attendant had brought sat untouched. She took a sip, grounding herself in the cold. Across the aisle, the older man leaned over slightly. Long night, he said, voice low and kind. Yes, Danielle replied. He smiled faintly. It's always the long nights that matter. She studied him more closely now. Silver hair, hands steady, a ring worn smooth by decades. You travel often, she said. Less than I used to, he said, enough to recognize a turning point when I see one. Danielle inclined her head. Then you know they don't announce themselves. He chuckled softly. No. They sit down quietly and wait. Hours later, as the plane crossed the Atlantic, a different kind of storm gathered far below. In a city that never slept, Ethan Brooks paced a narrow room under fluorescent lights, jacket discarded, tie loosened, hands shaking with a rage that had nowhere to land. His phone sat on a metal table, buzzing incessantly. He ignored it, then snatched it up, scrolling through messages that blurred into accusation. He watched the video again. The angle was unflattering. His voice sounded harsher than he remembered. The moment he pointed, the way the officers closed in. The caption had changed since the last time he'd checked. Words sharpened, judgment hardened. He slammed the phone down. She ruined me, he muttered to the empty room. A public defender stood near the door, clipboard tucked under one arm. You need to calm down, she said. You're not helping yourself. She orchestrated it, Ethan said. She had contacts. The defender didn't respond. She had seen this before. Men mistaking reach for conspiracy, privilege for permanence. Back in the air, dawn crept along the horizon, a thin line of pale gold cutting through the dark. The cabin lights brightened gradually. People stirred, trays clattered, coffee steamed. Danielle stretched, rolling her shoulders once. Her phone buzzed again. A new message from her chief of staff. The video had surfaced. Clear this time. Multiple angles. Sound intact. The narrative shifting with breathtaking speed. She closed her eyes and allowed herself a single breath of relief. Not victory. Balance. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be beginning our descent shortly." Danielle gathered her things, movements precise. She felt the weight of what waited on the ground. Cameras, questions, contracts that did not pause for scandal. But she also felt something else, steadier. The knowledge that truth, once airborne, traveled on its own. As the plane angled downward, the older man across the aisle stood and offered his hand. "Safe landing," he said. She shook it. "Thank you." He hesitated, then smiled. "By the way," he added, "I'm Charles." "Danielle," she said. He nodded, eyes twinkling. "I know." The wheels touched down with a firm, decisive thud. The cabin erupted in applause, scattered and sincere. Danielle felt the impact travel through her bones, anchoring her to the moment. Whatever waited beyond the gate, the trajectory had changed. And somewhere beneath the roar of reverse thrust and rain, a different realization took hold, quiet and irrevocable. This story was no longer about a seat. It was about who had the right to stand their ground, and who had mistaken the floor for a throne. The jet bridge door opened to a wall of noise, not the casual hum of arrivals, but the sharp, chaotic crackle of voices layered over one another, cameras clicking like insects, footsteps rushing out of sync. Danielle Carter felt it before she saw it. The pressure, the hunt. As she stepped into the terminal, flashes erupted. White light, sudden, unforgiving. "Ms. Carter, over here. Did you assault a fellow passenger? Are the rumors true your company is under investigation? Were you removed from first class?" The questions came fast, overlapping, careless with truth. Security moved in tight around her, forming a moving barrier of dark suits and clipped instructions. Danielle kept her head level, her pace even. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. She could feel the narrative trying to grab her, twist her into something smaller, something volatile. Her phone vibrated again in her hand. She didn't look at it. To her right, Charles matched her stride effortlessly, his presence oddly grounding amid the chaos. He leaned in just enough for her to hear him. Eyes forward, he said, "Let them shout. Silence unnerves them more than denial." They pushed through the terminal, the noise following like a wake. A woman stumbled backward, nearly colliding with a luggage cart. A man shouted her name again, louder, as if volume could force truth into existence. They reached the lounge doors, frosted glass, sudden quiet. Inside, the air felt cooler, controlled. The door slid shut behind them, muting the storm to a dull roar. Danielle exhaled slowly, the breath she'd been holding since touchdown finally releasing. Her shoulders loosened a fraction. Charles gestured to a chair. "Sit," he said. She did. The lounge attendant hovered nearby, eyes wide, unsure whether to offer coffee or disappear. Charles waved him off gently. Give us a moment. Danielle finally unlocked her phone. The screen flooded instantly. Missed calls stacked like fallen dominoes. Emails flagged urgent. Headlines half-written, each more reckless than the last. She scrolled once, jaw tightening. AR rage incident delays. Transatlantic flight. Logistics. CEO. Questioned after mid-air altercation. Sources say, investigation looming. They moved fast, she said quietly. They always do, Charles replied. He removed his coat and draped it over the chair beside him, movements unhurried. Truth takes time. Lies sprint. Her phone buzzed again. Incoming call. Marcus, her chief operating officer. She answered. Talk to me. His voice was tight. It's messy. The video's out, but so is his version. Bots are amplifying it. Stock dipped 8% pre-market. Boards requesting an emergency call within the hour. Danielle closed her eyes briefly. Tell them I'll be available after I clear customs. Security's recommending you avoid public exits, Marcus added. There are protest stores. And supporters. It's turning into a circus. Understood, Danielle said. Lock comms until legal approved statements. No reactions. No leaks. A pause. He's not stopping, Marcus said. Ethan. He's contacting tabloids. He's framing this as discrimination against him. Danielle's lips pressed into a thin line. Let him. She ended the call and set the phone down. Charles watched her carefully. You're calm, he observed. I'm focused, she replied. There's a difference. He smiled faintly. You remind me of someone. She glanced at him. Your son. He chuckled. No. His mother. She had that same look when the world tried to corner her. Danielle leaned back, folding her hands. He's going to escalate, she said. People like him always do when control slips. Yes, Charles agreed. They mistake volume for leverage. She looked at him now, really looked. The lines in his face weren't from age alone. They were earned, negotiated, survived. Why are you helping me? She asked. You don't have to. Charles didn't answer immediately. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. An older model, scuffed. He tapped the screen, then slid it across the table. A video filled the display. Clear, stable. Close enough to hear breath and tension. It was the moment in first class. Ethan's voice, sharp. Her voice, steady. Emily's hesitation. The snapped finger. The entitlement laid bare, frame by frame. Danielle watched without blinking. I've seen men like him my entire career, Charles said quietly. They thrive because people look away. Today, people didn't. She handed the phone back. This won't end him. No, Charles said. But it will define him. A knock at the door interrupted them. A security officer leaned in. Ms. Carter, we're ready to move you. Danielle stood, smoothing her jacket. The mirror across the lounge reflected her back. She looked exactly as she felt. Controlled, unbroken. As they exited through a private corridor, her phone buzzed once more. A new message. Unknown number. She opened it. You think this is over? You're wrong. No signature, no need. Danielle locked the phone and slipped it back into her pocket. Outside, a black sedan waited, engine idling. Rain speckled the pavement, the city blurred beyond the tinted windows. As she slid into the back seat, the door closing with a solid, final sound, Danielle allowed herself one brief moment of stillness. She knew what was coming next. Smear campaigns, legal threats, market pressure. The long, grinding test of resolve that followed public confrontation. She also knew something else. Ethan Brooks had mistaken her silence for weakness. The car pulled away from the curb, merging into traffic, carrying her toward a meeting that would decide the future of more than one company. Behind them, cameras still flashed at empty space, shouting questions to no one. Danielle watched the city pass by, reflections sliding across the glass like shifting masks. The real fight, she understood now, was just beginning. By the time the car reached the river, the city had already decided who she was supposed to be. Danielle Carter watched the headlines update in real time on the screen, embedded in the seat in front of her, each one sharper than the last, each one less interested in accuracy than speed. Words like altercation, controversy, questions raised. No mention yet of provocation, no mention of who had stood in whose way. Her phone vibrated again. Legal this time. She answered without looking at the screen. Go ahead. They're filing a civil complaint, the voice said. Calm, measured, hostile environment, emotional distress, wrongful removal of a passenger. Danielle nodded once, even though no one could see it. Expected. There's more, he continued. He's pushing a narrative that you leveraged improper influence to ground the aircraft. Danielle's gaze drifted to the river, sliding past the window, dark and swollen from rain. Influence isn't improper when it's contractual, she said, and grounding a plane for a security issue is standard protocol. A pause. We'll respond accordingly. Not yet, Danielle said. Let him talk. Another pause. That's risky. So is interrupting someone while they're making a mistake, she replied. Document everything. I want timestamps. Every call. Every outlet. Understood. The line went dead. The car slowed as it approached the hotel, a block already cordoned off with temporary barriers. A few figures lingered behind them, phones raised, lenses hungry. Security exited first, scanning. Danielle waited until the door was opened for her, then stepped out into the damp evening air. Inside, the lobby was hushed. Marble floors, low voices. The kind of calm money bought to insulate itself from the noise outside. As the elevator doors closed, sealing her in, Danielle finally allowed the tension to shift. Not disappear. Shift. It settled lower, deeper, more dangerous. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she knew who it was before she looked. Ethan Brooks. She didn't answer. The phone rang again, then again. Voicemail notifications stacked. She ignored them all. In another part of the city, Ethan sat hunched on the edge of a hotel bed that no longer felt like a reward. The lights were too bright, the silence too loud. His phone glowed in his hand, slick with sweat. Every refresh brought another betrayal, another comment, another analyst distancing themselves. The firm's statement had been brief, cold. No defense, no loyalty. He scrolled back to the video, watching himself speak, watching the sneer he hadn't known was there, watching her stillness, the way it made him look small. "This isn't over," he muttered. He opened his contacts and found the name he was looking for. A public relations fixer, someone who specialized in messes that couldn't be cleaned, only redirected. When the call connected, Ethan didn't bother with pleasantries. "I need the nuclear option," he said. "Now." Back at the hotel, Danielle stood at the window of her suite, jacket draped over a chair, shoes kicked off. The city sprawled beneath her, lights blinking like a restless organism. She loosened her collar and finally, checked her messages. There it was, a headline she hadn't expected yet. "Former exec claims discrimination in high-profile flight incident." She read the article once, twice. The language was careful, plausible, quotes attributed to anonymous sources, a suggestion that perhaps power had been abused, that perhaps she was not as neutral as she appeared. She closed the browser and dialed Marcus. "They're shifting," she said. "I know," he replied. "Board's nervous." "Good," Danielle said. "Fear sharpens attention." "Danielle," Marcus said carefully, "they're asking if stepping back temporarily might stabilize the stock." She turned from the window. The reflection that stared back at her was calm, but there was steel beneath it now. "If I step back," she said, "I validate his lie." Silence. "I won't do that," she added. "I'll tell them," Marcus said. He hesitated. "For what it's worth, most of them agree with you. They're just afraid." "So is he," Danielle said. "That's why he's loud." She ended the call and moved to the desk, opening her laptop. The documents loaded quickly. She didn't skim. She read. Numbers, clauses, timelines. This was the language she trusted. This was where control lived. An hour later, a knock came at the door. She didn't look up. "Come in." Charles entered without ceremony, a folder tucked under his arm. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it for a moment, studying her. "He's going scorched earth," he said. "Yes," Danielle replied, still reading. "That was always the plan." Charles crossed the room and placed the folder on the desk. "This is everything we have on him. Past complaints, settlements, patterns." Danielle finally looked up. "You didn't have to do this." "I did," Charles said. "Because this isn't just about you." She flipped the folder open. Names, dates, similar incidents, buried. Quietly resolved. Money had smoothed everything. Until now. "He's been protected," she said. "Yes," Charles replied, "by systems that benefit men like him." She closed the folder. "Not this time." Charles watched her for a long moment. "He's going to try to hurt you where it counts," he said. "Your reputation, your credibility, your deals." Danielle nodded. "Then I'll meet him there." Across town, Ethan slammed his phone onto the table as the fixer laid out the plan. Leak concerns about her company. Question governance. Hint at investigations. Nothing concrete, just enough smoke. They'll panic, the fixer said. Markets hate uncertainty. Ethan smiled for the first time that night. Do it. The fixer hesitated. This could escalate. I want it to, Ethan said. She took everything from me. No, the fixer said quietly. She didn't. You did. Ethan glared. Do it. Back in her suite, Danielle felt the shift before the alert came. The market notification chimed. 1%, then 2. A downward flicker that meant nothing alone but everything together. She stared at the screen, unblinking. Here we go, she murmured. Charles stepped closer. You don't have to carry this alone. Danielle closed the laptop gently. I know, she said, but I will carry it. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware that 2 trajectories had just crossed. One driven by desperation, the other by resolve. And somewhere between them, the truth waited, patient and sharp, ready to surface when the noise exhausted itself. Morning came without mercy. The city woke loud and hungry, and the headlines sharpened overnight. Danielle Carter stood in the shower longer than usual, letting the water drum against her shoulders until the noise in her head flattened into something usable. When she stepped out, the phone was already vibrating on the counter, relentless, insistent, like a pulse that refused to slow. She wrapped a towel around herself and read the first alert. Then the second. Then the third. Anonymous sources. Question. Carter. Vanguard governance. Market reacts to uncertainty around logistics. Giant. Former exec claims pattern of intimidation. She shut the screen off and dressed in silence. Dark suit, clean lines, no jewelry. She tied her hair back and studied her reflection. There was no crack in it. If there was fear, it lived somewhere deeper, where it couldn't interfere. In another hotel across the city, Ethan Brooks watched the same headlines with a different expression. Relief. Satisfaction. The first real breath he'd taken in hours. His phone buzzed with confirmations from the fixer. Placement secured. Keywords trending. A sympathetic analyst willing to ask questions on air. They're listening, Ethan said, pacing. I told you they would. The fixer's voice stayed cautious. They're listening for now. But this only works if nothing contradicts it. Ethan stopped pacing. Nothing will. Back at her desk, Danielle opened a secure call with Marcus and legal. Faces appeared in clean squares. Tired eyes, tight jaws. Pre-market dipped another 3 points, Marcus said. We're still solvent, but sentiments spooked. Legal chimed in. They're floating the idea of an inquiry. No filing yet, just implication. Danielle nodded once. Good. That gives us room. Marcus frowned. Room for what? For truth, she said, which arrives slower but stays longer. A pause. The board wants to know if you'll make a statement, Marcus added. I will, Danielle said. But not yet. Legal leaned forward. With respect, delaying could let the narrative calcify. Danielle met his gaze. Narratives built on noise collapse when confronted with evidence. We wait until the evidence is undeniable. Another pause. Reluctant agreement. She ended the call and turned to Charles, who stood near the window, watching the city like a chessboard. "He's pushing governance," she said. "That's his angle." Charles nodded. "It's the only one he has left." "Then he'll overreach," Danielle replied. "Men like him can't stop themselves." As if on cue, her phone chimed again. A new article, this one bolder. A mention of a dormant regulatory clause, a suggestion that Carter Vanguard's fleet might be subject to review. Danielle's eyes narrowed. "There it is." Charles crossed the room. "He's trying to slow you down." "Not slow," she said. "Stop." Across the city, Ethan grinned as the fixer relayed the next step. "We poke the regulator," the fixer said. "Old contact. Quiet call. Trigger a standard review. 48 hours. That's all we need." Ethan leaned back, hands laced behind his head. "By the time she clears it, the deal's dead." "You're playing with federal agencies," the fixer warned. Ethan's smile thinned. "I'm reminding them who pays attention." The call ended. Ethan stared at the ceiling, heart racing, convinced he'd finally found leverage. He imagined her at a boardroom table, blind-sided, scrambling. The image soothed him. In Danielle's suite, the call came in with a different tone. Urgent. Official. "Ms. Carter," the voice said, "this is the Regional Freight Inspector's office. We're initiating a routine audit under Protocol 14B. Danielle closed her eyes briefly. "When?" "Effective immediately." She thanked him and ended the call. The room felt very quiet. Marcus's face reappeared on her screen moments later, pale. "They've grounded 3 lanes. The clause kicks in at 24 hours. Charles exhaled slowly. He moved. "Yes," Danielle said, "and now he's exposed." She reached for her phone and dialed a number she rarely used. It rang twice. "Secretary Adams," she said when the line connected. "It's Danielle Carter." A pause. Recognition. Danielle. "I heard about the flight. I'm calling about something else," she said. "An audit just triggered on my fleet. I believe it was initiated under false pretenses." Silence stretched, then measured. "Send me everything." "I already have," Danielle replied. "Timestamps, call logs, media coordination." Another pause. Heavier now. "Stay where you are." She ended the call and looked at Charles. "It's in motion." Charles studied her, something like pride flickering across his face. "You anticipated this." "I counted on it," she said. Desperation accelerates mistakes. Hours later, Ethan sat in a borrowed conference room, giddy and wired, listening in on a call he had no right to be on. The voices droned about compliance and checks and timelines. He muted and unmuted himself, waiting for his moment. When it came, he couldn't resist. "Have you checked the database?" he interjected, voice cracking with excitement. "Her fleet's grounded. That affects reliability clauses." Silence fell on the line. Then another voice joined. Calm, authoritative. "Mr. Brooks," it said. "How are you on this call?" Ethan froze. "This is Secretary Adams," the voice continued. "And I believe you've just admitted to interfering with federal protocol." Ethan's mouth opened. No sound came out. Across the ocean of distance and consequence, Danielle's voice cut in, clear and level. "Hello, Ethan. I was wondering when you'd show yourself." "You're bluffing," Ethan stammered. "This audit is real." "It was," Danielle said. "It's been rescinded." "No," he whispered. "My planes took off 10 minutes ago," she continued, "and this call is being recorded." The room seemed to tilt. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. "I didn't do anything illegal." "Actually," another voice added, sharper now, "you did." Heavy knocks sounded behind him, loud, unmistakable. Ethan turned in his chair, panic finally breaking through. "Wait," he said into the phone. "This is a misunderstanding." The door burst open. Jackets with letters he recognized from movies, but never expected in real life. "Ethan Brooks," a voice announced. "You're under arrest." On the call, no one spoke. Danielle closed her eyes, not in relief, but in finality. The sound of cuffs carried through the speaker, metallic and absolute. When the line went dead, the room around her felt lighter, as if a pressure system had passed. Charles picked up a pen from the desk and slid it toward her. "The boardroom's ready," he said. "So is the truth." Danielle took the pen. Outside, the city continued its roar, unaware that a different kind of silence had just settled, the kind that follows accountability. She stood, straightened her jacket, and walked toward the door. The boardroom smelled like polished wood and old decisions. Danielle Carter took her seat at the head of the table without ceremony, setting her folder down as if it weighed nothing at all. Screens along the wall flickered to life, faces resolving into clarity one by one. Executives, counsel, advisors who had spent the last 24 hours recalculating their understanding of power. No one spoke at first. Outside the glass, the city moved, indifferent. Inside, time slowed. "Let's begin," Danielle said. The words were simple. They landed with force. Marcus cleared his throat. "Before we proceed, we've received confirmation from Federal Transportation. The audit has been formally rescinded. All lanes are active." A murmur traveled the table. Relief, controlled but unmistakable. "And the call," Danielle said. Legal leaned forward. "Recorded. Time stamped. Chain of custody established. Admissions are clear." Another murmur, this one sharper, the kind that realigned loyalties. A man at the far end shifted in his chair. He had been one of the loudest voices the night before, urging caution, urging distance. He avoided Danielle's eyes now. "Then we're aligned," she said. "We proceed." The screen to her right changed. Numbers appeared. Timelines. The merger framework that had waited patiently while men made noise. "We lost 12 hours, Danielle continued. "We did not lose momentum. The reliability clause stands. Delivery metrics exceed threshold. There is no breach." Silence again. This time, reverent. Charles sat one chair back, hands folded, watching the room recalibrate. He caught Danielle's eye and nodded once. It was done. Across the city, in a holding room that smelled of disinfectant and regret, Ethan Brooks stared at a wall painted a shade of beige designed to drain thought. The cuffs had been removed, replaced by a heavy awareness he could not shake. His phone was gone. His voice, too. An agent stepped in, calm, practiced. "We'll be going over your statements," he said. "Your contacts, your financials." Ethan swallowed. "I want a lawyer." "You'll get one," the agent replied. "But understand this. This isn't about a plain seat anymore." Ethan laughed weakly. "It never was." "No," the agent said. "It was about control." Back in the boardroom, Danielle signed the final page with a steady hand. Ink dried. Screens flashed confirmation. A quiet exhale passed through the room like a tide going out. "It's done," Marcus said. Danielle capped the pen. "Good." She stood. Chairs scraped back as others followed, instinctively, as if rising was the correct response to gravity. "Before we adjourn," she added, "there's one more thing." They waited. "This company does not hide behind silence," Danielle said. "We don't weaponize ambiguity. We don't trade dignity for speed. If anyone here believes otherwise, now is the time to speak." No one did. She nodded once. "Then we move forward." The meeting dissolved into smaller conversations. Phones came out, messages drafted with care instead of panic. Charles lingered by the window, watching the skyline accept the morning. "You could have crushed him," he said quietly. "You chose not to." Danielle joined him. "I chose precision." He smiled. "That's rarer." Later, as the day stretched into afternoon, the press conference assembled with predictable urgency. Microphones clustered, logos jostled. 1,000 versions of the story waited to be told. Danielle stepped to the podium alone. The room hushed. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't smile. She spoke plainly. "Yesterday, a transatlantic flight was delayed due to a security issue. The facts are now public. A passenger refused crew instructions, attempted to exert improper influence, and later escalated the situation through false claims and federal interference." She paused, letting the words settle. "I was not removed from a seat," she continued. "I refused to be moved from one I paid for." "There is a difference." Cameras clicked, pens scratched. "This company welcomes scrutiny," Danielle said, "because scrutiny requires truth, and truth is resilient." A reporter raised a hand. "Ms. Carter, do you consider this a victory?" Danielle looked directly at him. "No," she said. "I consider it accountability." Another voice. "Do you feel vindicated?" She shook her head slightly. "Vindication implies injury." I stood. "That's all." When it ended, she stepped away from the lights without waiting for applause. That evening, alone in her office, Danielle finally allowed herself to sit in the quiet. The city glowed beyond the glass. She loosened her jacket and rested her hands on the desk, feeling the grain of the wood, grounding herself in the tangible. Her phone buzzed once more. A message from an unknown number. "You ruined my life." She stared at it for a moment, then deleted it without reply. Another message arrived. Marcus. Market closed up 6.2. Analysts calling it a correction. She smiled faintly. Not for the number. For the word. Correction. Down the hall, a young assistant passed by, glancing through the glass, catching a glimpse of the woman who had not moved when told to. The assistant straightened her shoulders as she walked on, something in her posture newly aligned. Outside, the city kept moving. Stories shifted. Attention drifted. But somewhere beneath the noise, a lesson had settled into place, quiet and immovable. Power did not announce itself. It waited. And when it stood, it did not need permission. The city exhaled overnight, the way it always did after spectacle, attention drifting toward the next hunger. Danielle Carter arrived early the next morning, before the building filled with voices and urgency, before her name became shorthand again. The elevator carried her up in silence, numbers ticking past with mechanical patience, and when the doors opened, the floor was still asleep. She walked the length of the corridor alone. Her heels made soft, deliberate sounds against the carpet. Glass walls reflected her back in fragments, a woman multiplied by angles and light, each version steady, each one unflinching. Inside her office, the desk was clear. No flowers, no congratulatory clutter. Just the weight of work waiting where it always did. She sat and opened her laptop. The news cycle had already begun to pivot. Yesterday's outrage softened into analysis. Analysis slid into commentary. Commentary into opinion. Opinion into something like learning, if the audience allowed it. She read none of it. She didn't need to. What mattered was the email marked confidential that arrived at 7:15 in the morning. Federal indictment filed. Multiple counts. Conspiracy. Wire fraud. Interference with transportation systems. She closed the message and folded her hands, resting them on the desk. The moment didn't feel like triumph. It felt like completion. A door closing with a sound you only notice when it's final. Across the river, in a holding cell washed in fluorescent light, Ethan Brooks sat on a narrow bench, elbows on knees, hands dangling uselessly between them. The bravado had burned off in the night, leaving something raw and exposed beneath. He stared at the floor, counting the scuffs, replaying moments that had once seemed small. The seat, the finger snap, the laugh he hadn't meant to sound cruel. The certainty that had carried him his entire life suddenly felt like a liability he could no longer afford. A guard passed, keys jangling. "You've got a visitor." Ethan looked up, startled. "Who?" The guard shrugged. "Lawyer, I assume." But it wasn't his lawyer who stepped into the room. It was someone else. Someone older. Someone who looked at him without anger, without pity. Arthur Hale sat across from him, folding his coat carefully before meeting Ethan's eyes. "This is the last time I'm doing this," Arthur said. Ethan swallowed. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Arthur's gaze didn't soften. "You always mean to go as far as you can get away with." Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. He had no argument left. "You confused access with entitlement," Arthur continued. "And when that failed, You confused noise with power." Ethan's shoulders slumped. "She destroyed me." Arthur shook his head once. "No." She stood still. "You ran into her." When Arthur stood to leave, Ethan reached out instinctively, fingers brushing empty air. "What happens now?" Arthur paused at the door. "Now you live with it." Back in the office, Danielle stood at the window as the building woke below her. Traffic thickened. Pedestrians hurried. The world resumed its patterns, indifferent to individual falls. She liked that. It meant systems were larger than egos. A knock came at the door. "Come in," she said. Emily Rogers stepped inside, posture straighter than before, uniform crisp, eyes clearer. She hesitated, then spoke. "I wanted to thank you." Danielle turned from the window. "For what?" "For not letting it slide," Emily said. "For making it matter." Danielle studied her for a moment. "You don't need permission to enforce what's right," she said. "You just need practice." Emily nodded, something like relief passing through her. "I won't forget." When she left, Danielle returned to her desk and opened a new document. Not legal, not financial. A memo to her leadership team, drafted with care. Effective immediately, Carter Vanguard Logistics will implement mandatory escalation protocols for frontline employees facing intimidation. No exceptions, no retaliation. Support will be visible, not implied. She reread it once, then sent it. Later that afternoon, she walked through the operations floor, the low hum of activity surrounding her. Screens glowed with data. Forklifts moved in distant warehouses, captured by live feeds. The system she'd built pulsed with quiet efficiency. A young analyst looked up as she passed, eyes widening slightly, then straightened in her chair. Danielle caught the motion and slowed. "How's the Chicago lane?" she asked. The analyst blinked, then answered, voice steadying as he spoke. "Ahead of schedule. Weather adjustments already recalculated." "Good," Danielle said. "Keep it that way." She moved on, leaving behind something subtle but lasting. The sense that presence did not have to shout to be felt. That evening, she met Charles for dinner at a small place off the river, quiet enough to hear the clink of cutlery and the murmur of other conversations. He raised his glass slightly. "To standing your ground," he said. Danielle tapped her glass to his. "To knowing when to." Charles smiled. "You changed more than a headline." She considered that. "I reminded people," she said. "The change is up to them." As night settled, Danielle returned home alone. She set her keys down, kicked off her shoes, and sat on the edge of the couch without turning on the lights. The city glow filtered in through the windows, soft and distant. Her phone lay silent on the table. For the first time in days, there was nothing she needed to respond to. No narrative to correct. No fire to contain. She leaned back and closed her eyes. In the quiet, the memory returned not as anger, but as clarity. The feel of the seat beneath her. The moment she chose not to move. The understanding that dignity, once surrendered, was rarely returned. Somewhere, someone would hear the story, and recognize themselves in it. Maybe a young woman on a late flight. Maybe a man accustomed to being believed. Maybe someone watching from the margins, learning where the line truly was. Danielle opened her eyes and looked out at the city one last time before bed. The world would keep testing people like her. It always did. But tonight, at least, it knew the answer. The story didn't end with sirens or signatures. It ended the way most real stories do, quietly, in the spaces people rarely film. Danielle Carter returned to routine, but routine was different now. Doors opened a fraction faster. Conversations paused when she entered rooms, not from fear, from recognition. She arrived at the operations center before sunrise one morning, the building still half dark, screens warming up, coffee brewing somewhere down the hall. The night shift supervisor straightened when he saw her, instinctive, respectful. "Morning," Danielle said. "Morning, Mom," he replied, then caught himself and smiled. Danielle. She nodded, approving the correction. Titles were useful. Names were human. She walked the floor, stopping at stations, asking questions that mattered. Not how did it look, but how did it feel? Where did pressure build? Where did people hesitate? Power, she knew now more than ever, lived in those pauses. In another city, another building, Ethan Brooks sat in a room that had no windows and no audience. Time moved differently there. Slow, heavy. He read reports with his name stripped of status, reduced to facts and charges. He learned what it felt like to be spoken about instead of spoken to. There were no cameras, no allies, only consequences and the long echo of words he could not take back. The difference between them was not luck. It was choice. Weeks passed. Markets stabilized. Contracts held. The merger Danielle had flown to sign became a case study in restraint rather than chaos. Analysts wrote think pieces. Commentators moved on. But something remained lodged beneath the surface, harder to dislodge. People remembered the moment she didn't stand up. A flight attendant in another city paused before backing down from a passenger who snapped his fingers. A junior associate spoke up in a meeting she would have once stayed silent through. A man used to being deferred to found himself, for the first time, having to explain why. These moments didn't trend. They didn't go viral. They accumulated. Danielle stood at a lectern months later, speaking to a room of young professionals. No cameras, no scripts, just faces waiting. "You don't always get credit for holding your ground," she told them. "Sometimes you get punished first. That's how you know it mattered." She didn't mention planes, or seats, or names. She didn't have to. Afterward, a woman approached her, eyes bright, voice steady with nerves. "I was on a flight last year," she said. "Something similar happened. I moved. I've thought about it every day since." Danielle listened. "Next time," she said gently, "you'll know." The woman nodded, exhaling, as if something long held had finally been released. That night, Danielle sat alone on her balcony, city lights stretching out beneath her like a map of possibility. She thought about the noise, the pressure, the moment everything narrowed to a single decision. stand or fold, stay or disappear. She had stayed. Not because she was fearless, because she was tired of pretending smallness was the cost of peace. Some stories end with applause. This one ended with alignment, with systems nudged back toward balance, with a quiet understanding spreading person to person, seat to seat, room to room. That power is not volume. That dignity is not negotiable. That sometimes the most radical act is refusing to move. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of a moment you wish you'd handled differently, or one you're preparing for now, take a second to show it some love. Hit like, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment with 3 words. Stand your ground.